I want to thank everybody who stayed because I have the secret to peace on earth. And now only you are going to know. I'm just kidding. I don't, but I have a little bit about what we could do locally here. And I'm so happy I was after, I want to say Mr. Reza, right? Is it? Meza, there you go. Yeah, I think it really goes along. Restorative justice goes along with what he said. And I just wanted to talk about a little bit of the work I'm doing now. I was here last year talking about communications for peace building. And that's been what I've done a long time. And just in the last 6 months, I've been working on restorative justice with a local organization. It's called OCO. It is the Orange County Congregation Community Organization. And we're part of a national group called PICO. And we do a lot of different organizing, but we also have a Live Free campaign that works on restorative justice. And it works to end mass incarceration and to end implicit bias and racial profiling and use of force and these kind of things in our policing. So it's been a really kind of a new field for me, but I've been able to take a lot of the knowledge I learned internationally and working with those returning from conflict back into their communities, and also even working with families of victims or that disappeared in Mexico or from Rwanda, because survivors of police violence, they really suffer really similar traumas. So it's very connected. And at first I was like, oh no, I'm an international peace builder. I don't do this local stuff. And I'm so happy, feel so blessed that I live in Garden Grove and I'm working in my neighborhood and I'm bringing peace to my own neighborhood. I'm not a foreigner, I'm not a stranger. I'm part of it, and I can go to my city council and I can advocate for my children. And that's really empowering, and that's what we want people to do around the world, right? We need civil society, and there's a crisis of civil society around the world, and we need to even start it here. So I'm really proud of doing it here. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about what restorative justice is. So it's nothing new, it's nothing I invented, it's not invented in Huntington Beach or in America, it's actually an indigenous idea. And it's maybe in the Hebrew scriptures they call it shalom. The Maori, they call it wakapapa. Can somebody say it better maybe? In Navajo, Hosu, in the Bantu languages, it's Ubuntu. And then you have Famultok in Sierra Leone. And it's a way, we have somebody from Sierra Leone here, so he might know about this. He's sitting by him. So basically it boils down to all things are created to each, are connected to each other, and we're in a web of relationships. So we are in community. So when there's violence or a crime, there's a wound to that community. And restorative justice is a way to bring that woundedness together again and to heal it. It's all wrongdoing is a sign of something deeper, that something deeper is wrong. The framing that I like to use is John Galtag's framing, because sometimes we think violence and we think of direct violence, and we think of the people that have suffered, in war or our veterans. But I like to look at violence as just a continuum. Direct violence is only possible because structural and cultural violence happens every day. Cultural violence, you could read the definition there, but I can tell you it's the harm we do to our immigrant communities. It's the harm that we don't let people speak their language. It's the harm that the nationalism, white privilege. This is cultural violence in our communities. You can go to other cultures and they have cultural violence also. And it's, we have Paula Garb here, and I was working in Georgia for a month that she recommended me to go there. And I went to Georgia, and one thing that was hilarious is that on that land, the Georgians had claimed their historical claim to the land. They were there since the beginning of time. So anybody that says, no, we were here also, or any other group, that was not the fact, that was not true. So they were doing historical cultural violence because nobody else can lay claim to the land. It was only one group, so everybody else is a foreigner, even if you've been there 3,000 years and they've been there 2,999. So it was that kind of cultural violence. And we've done that to our indigenous people here, to immigrants, to many different groups. But cultural violence really allows for a structural violence, right? When we let one group have more rights than another, when we give more freedoms to one group than another. And then that kind of structural violence breeds the hate that brings direct violence. Structural violence is also, you can find in the root causes of poverty and the root causes of violence in our communities. High density housing, because housing costs are too high. Maybe lack of parking because nobody's investing in any kind of infrastructure in poor communities, that causes conflict, intercommunal conflict. So all of these are root causes, and they lead to direct violence. So sometimes in restorative justice, we look at the harms that are only done by direct violence, but I think there's been a lot of proof that we can see, and evidence-based proof that structural and cultural violence cause a lot of trauma and harm that lead to direct violence. But as it is, restorative justice is a process. It's basically a process. It's done in circles, or it's done in community conferencing with police. It's done in many different ways, but it brings the one that has created the harm, the offender, and the victim, and brings them together, and basically lets them talk it out and correct the harm. So it seeks to heal the harm and to bring that group back together. With crime and restorative justice, it's about the idea that because crime hurts, justice should heal. It follows that conversations with those who have been hurt and with those who have inflicted the harm must be central to the process. So it also requires a narrative shift. I presented something like this to the police chief of Anaheim and his advisory board last Friday. It was around Prop 47, which I'll talk about in a minute, but Proposition 47 changed 6 felonies to misdemeanors. And those are mostly felonies that were property or check fraud, or they're poverty crimes, you could say. So he wanted, the advisory board wanted to hear a community perspective. And I just started by, what we're doing is actually, we have to shift a narrative, right? This is not a law enforcement perspective. We're not enforcing the law. We're looking at what the community needs. So it really is a shift in narrative. So it's from punishing crime to repairing communal harm. It's the idea from they should just be rotting in jail to they're a useful member of our community. Maybe from separate to united, or they're just a product of the system to they can be transforming a system. So part of our work is interrupting the schools to prison pipeline. And that means that cultural and structural violence is done in our schools also, whether it's criminalizing youth of color or it's criminalizing activities that come from a lot of trauma, right? Hyperactivity or speaking up, disrupting class. This can come from trauma and not having the kind of needs and attentions you might have if you were born or raised in poverty. So when we talk about schools to prison pipeline, we joke that private schools, parents pay for tolerance. In public schools, you get zero tolerance. So if you want to have kids that won't get in trouble, you have to send them to a private school. So this zero tolerance policies have created a system where if a child acts outside the normative, then they're criminalized and they get suspended. And this breeds a culture where they have almost a stigma on themselves that they're bad kids and they're just criminals. And then this continues outside of school. There's a framing that even continues that says it's a schools to prison to deportation pipeline, especially in Orange County where we see a lot of undocumented youth that are part of the system. So it's not only in the schools, it's within law enforcement, and then it's also to getting deported because of their status as they were brought as children. So in this view, incarceration is not always the solution. It's not always the answer. When formerly incarcerated, return to our communities, they're more traumatized. Some have PTSD, some are worse off. We cannot incarcerate or arrest the problems away. The problems exist in our communities. We can't just throw people in prison. A lot of those that are returning citizens, returning from prison, from Prop 47, we're getting a lot of complaints from police departments on, oh, there's no money to deal with them. Why are they, they're just gonna cause all this crime. Well, the fact of the matter is that they were gonna be coming anyways. A lot of the crimes, they're not life sentences. So we need to figure out a way as a community to deal with this because it's been a problem since the beginning. And we need to figure out a way to restore and rehabilitate people that are either have been involved in crime or have been caught up in the system. So we have to look at community building and root causes of violence. So in community organizing, I just wanted to share some stories of what we do. So we have a few models, but ours is first empowering voices. So who leads the movement? So what we focus on is those that are directly impacted by violence, crime, police brutality, incarceration, that they're leading the movement. Here we have on this side here, is next to me. We were just in Sacramento on Monday and Tuesday, and we were with Pico, California, and we co-sponsored a few bills on implicit bias, on racial profiling, and on use of force. And it was up in committee. And who was there speaking was, we all went to task for proof, was formerly incarcerated. This, to my left, is a woman, Teresa Smith from Anaheim. Her son was killed by Anaheim PD 5 years ago. And they were speaking for themselves. So empowering themselves, them to be able to speak. We were in committee, we all went one by one to say that we believe in it. Santiago, he's a senator from downtown LA, and he abstained from the first vote and on racial bias. And the second vote, he actually left the room. And so for us, he didn't want to vote, even though he's a Democrat. You would think he's Latino. You would think, you can't assume anything. So we were really curious because we knew that he was going to support this policy. And so what happened was this community, they went up to his office and they started saying testimonies and telling why they need these kind of policies. And they spoke with his chief of staff, and we were just telling testimonies and talking and singing, and he changed his vote. So the empowerment and their voices actually passed through committee 2 policies that would change implicit bias, racial profiling, and use of force. And that's where their voice can make a difference. The empowerment that they felt that, like, wow, my story matters and it can actually affect policy to stop the practices that have victimized me, was really powerful. So I talked a little bit about changing policy. Some of the policies we're working on locally are, so we're doing circles instead of suspensions. We're also part of we're part of the Santa Ana Building Healthy Communities. Like Tony referred to the Long Beach one. We're one of the 13 or 14, I thought it was 13, but 13 communities in California that are doing this. And there's parts of our group that are doing circles in schools in Santa Ana. We're doing some of them in Anaheim. So instead of being suspended, the kids that have done wrong and the kids that have been victimized, they come in and they do circles or they do community conferencing. There's also groups like Project Kinship that are working with those formerly incarcerated. And they come from the Homeboy Industries. They're here in Orange County. And we're working with them to see about bringing diversion programs, and especially pre-booking diversion programs. So people that have been caught with a misdemeanor, that they would actually be able to go to these diversion programs and do an 8-week curriculum where they can be rehabilitated and transformed rather than go into the system again. And procedural justice. So we're working with police departments in Santa Ana and Anaheim to look at what their policies on use of force, on racial profiling, on implicit bias are, and to look to shift that. And then last is investing in peace fair, shifting money from mass incarceration to transformation. And that's the last part, and I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about how we do it. So the first part is we shift narratives, so our values, they ground us, and then we are led by those directly impacted, and we work towards peace to end cultural violence. That's through implicit bias, criminalization of our youth and people of color, othering the immigrant, structural violence. We build movements led by the people that create and implement policies, implement policies that are just, inclusive, and restorative. And the last is direct violence, interrupt violence through restoration opportunities for those most at risk. So that's happening in Orange County today, and it's being replicated in many countries around the world, but also in the United States. Lastly, I just wanted to, the PDF didn't look too good there, but just to kind of give you how this is all coming together. So Prop 47, the Orange County voted 53% for Prop 47, and the state of California voted 59%, and that means that 6 felonies change into misdemeanors. Well, the funding for this is not here yet, and right now we're having a shift in narratives where a lot of the police departments are saying that they need this money because people are creating more crime that are being released from these crimes. However, this money was specifically supposed to go to victim services, education, K through 12, and rehabilitation programs. Only those 3 things. But now the narrative shift is what we're hearing from police is that they're basically creating a narrative that they need the funding. So we're creating a narrative, a counter narrative, that our groups are ready and willing to address those issues. So we're having a town hall. The State Board of Community Corrections is the largest criminal justice, the most powerful criminal justice agency in California. And we're having a town hall with them. Pico, California, and OCO is co-organizing it. We're having a town hall in Los Angeles. And you're all invited to come. And that's where we're going to be sharing stories. Again, those directly impacted are going to get a chance to share their stories of criminalization, of incarceration, and where that money should be going. And so we've had two already in different parts of the state, and they've really shifted. For example, now there's 2 of the advisors will be those that are directly impacted, advising this board. So this is a way that we're shifting policies towards restorative justice in California. And it's not just the theory, it's not just the talk, it's a way that's really shifting, changing lives through policy. So thanks for your time, and I'd love to talk to any after about this or anything else. Thank you.